Of Geiger Wealth.
Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. I've said on this show before, 50 years from now, we're going to look back and say in the 20th century into the 21st century, two of the most important economists in the world were Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams, and we're fortunate that they're still around and still opining and still producing content and still teaching young people. And we're fortunate to have Walter Williams on the show routinely. Thomas Sowell, we talked about because he did an appearance on Fox Business recently where he was asked a range of questions, including about the siren song of socialism. Can and will America resist it? And here's what the great Thomas Sowell had to say.
The future of America. I mean, do you think that we are destined to go through a period of socialism, a period where these ideas that have not worked, no matter where they've been tried, and certainly wouldn't work here, will be tried here and could bring down our country?
Well, the predictions of economists do not encourage me to go far in that direction. But I do have a great fear that in the long run, we may not make it, and I hate to say that, but and the one thing that keeps me from being despairing is of course we don't know. There's so many things we can't possibly know, and so we may make it, but I wouldn't bet on it.
I wouldn't bet on it. By the way, just compare the humility of Thomas Sowell, who has nothing to be humble about in terms of his scholarship for 60 years. To the pronouncements of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and those of her ilk who know everything about everything and what's going to happen. It's the lack of humility continues to be the thing that's the most remarkable to me. It's not just the dalliance with silly ideas, which happens with each passing generation. But I wanted to get His Eminence Walter Williams on to respond in part to his friend Thomas Sowell about this matter of socialism. We're pleased to be joined now by economics professor and syndicated columnist Walter Williams. Professor Williams, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
So what about what Thomas Sowell had to say? Are you in that same camp?
I think that my colleague is absolutely right. And I think that there's a burden of proof on people who are calling for socialism to show where it really works. Now, a lot of people will say, well, there's Sweden. Well, Sweden, it turned out that Sweden tried socialism for 2 or 3 decades, and they went back to freer markets. And matter of fact, today's socialists in our country, such as AOC, they would not like the rules or the new laws in Sweden. For example, in Sweden, there's no minimum wage. In Sweden, there's a voucher system for schools. They've heavily deregulated their economy. Now, they still have a huge handout state, welfare state, but I think that's going to even decline as well as the number of immigrants come into the country, making welfare more controversial in the country.
Well, don't you think that?
So let me just say that anywhere else, South America, Russia, China, Eastern Europe, and if you ask the question, people around the world, which way are they running? Are they running to socialist countries, or are they running to free market or capitalist countries? And it would have to unambiguously be the latter.
Well, do you think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the others, do you think that they're even paying attention to what's going on in Venezuela?
Well, I think they can't ignore it. It's almost, you just plain can't ignore the suffering and the horror in Venezuela. And speaking of another South American country, Argentina, I think in the 1930s or 1940s, or 1920s, that Argentina was, I think, the 8th richest country in the world, and they Juan Perón and socialists came in there, and they now it's a basket case.
I wanted to stick on AOC for a minute because you're in the uncomfortable company of the AFL-CIO in dismissing her Green New Deal. And you wrote a column recently about the Earth's resilience. Again, the issue of humility. Let's have a little bit of understanding of history, the cataclysms that have impacted human beings and the planet generally, and what we've all survived to this point in 2019. So just to kind of give a little bit of perspective that maybe plastic straws won't be our end.
I wrote the column because I listened to quotation. I read quotations such as "The world that we live in is beautiful but fragile." The third rock from the sun is fragile. The Earth needs to be saved every day. And so anybody saying the Earth is fragile ignores history. And I just mentioned a few cataclysmic events that the Earth survived. I point out the 1883 eruption of Krakatoa volcano in Indonesia. It had when it blew up. When it erupted, it had the force of 13,000 15-kiloton atomic bombs, like the ones we dropped on Hiroshima, and the Earth survived. There was the 1815. There was the Tambora eruption that caused there to be a year without a sun. That is, it was so much debris in the atmosphere that they said it was a year without a summer, rather. And then there have been cataclysmic floods in our country, on our Earth, and there have been meteor, you can call them attacks if you want to, from and the Earth still survived. And mankind has nowhere near the power of nature, and I think it's very arrogant of people to think that we can make significant parametric changes in the Earth. We just can't do that. Mankind is not powerful enough to do that.
Against the backdrop of this college admissions scandal that broke yesterday, I just wanted to get your perspective on the scandal, yes, but more on the change in students that you see at George Mason College, what's happening on college campuses today, since you've commented on that.
I think that across the country, roughly 50% of students should not be in college. They should be doing something else. And why do I say 50%? Well, it turns out that according to estimates, that incoming freshmen they're forced by the colleges to take remedial English, remedial writing, and remedial math. And so that says that their high school diplomas are fraudulent. High school diplomas attest that you can read and write at 12th grade level when very often they can't. And so I would get rid of roughly 50% of the students on college campuses, let them do something else rather than waste their time and waste the time of other professors and students. But colleges, this scandal that came out yesterday, that was revealed yesterday, is just really the tip of the iceberg. That is, colleges are dens of inequity in general. That is, the presidents and the board of directors allow all kinds of nonsense to go on in college campuses, such as black kids demanding and getting segregated dorms. They're having women's studies courses that teach young girls that men are evil, and African American studies that teaches that white people are evil, and this kind of stuff should not be on a college campus.
So were you surprised, though, that this was happening? And do you think there's going to be more people, in other universities that might be taken into custody and charged?
Well, yeah, I think that I'm not surprised at all. And furthermore, look at the University of North Carolina scandal a few years ago that I wrote about. That they're bringing basketball players and football players. They're admitting them to college. And these kids, the tutor blew the whistle on it. Many of these kids cannot read and write at the 8th grade level, and many cannot read and write at the 3rd grade level, but yet they were being admitted to college. And so there are two cases of fraud. One, the high school diploma that they received is fraudulent, and then the people who admit them, to colleges. They're doing dishonest things. But however, it turns out that basketball and football contributes millions of dollars to the budget of the University of North Carolina. And I'm not just picking on the University of North Carolina. Other universities do the same thing.
Well, this has been going on for a long time, like you say. I mean, so everybody's, always sort of in the present with no institutional memory. I mean, I remember high-profile cases, much less the low ones. Dexter Manley, the great Washington Redskins defensive lineman, who later came out and said his time at Oklahoma State, he got out of Oklahoma State University without being able to read.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And that's 30 years ago.
And that's going on all over the country. So the fraud that we saw revealed yesterday is just really the tip of the iceberg on what's going on college campuses in our country.
I want to go back to something you said about you'd empty out 50% of the students in college. One of the things that seems to me, in terms of the sort of the unfairness of the way the system is set up because of government intrusion, is you have people not going to college, going to work, subsidizing six-figure debt for those who are going to college because of the federal loan program and, of course, all the talk now from the socialists about loan forgiveness and free college tuition.
Well, yeah, and the socialists want as many people in college as they can possibly get, because college is where these kids are get the propaganda from the left. That is, and you hear many administrators talking about diversity and multiculturalism. The next time you hear a college president talking about the importance of diversity, ask him how many Republicans are on the faculty in the sociology department, or the Black Studies department, or the Women's Studies department, or the English department, and he'll probably say one, if that.
He is Walter Williams, the great one, professor of economics at George Mason University. I just wish he was president.
Exactly.
He's also a syndicated columnist. Professor Williams, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Goodbye.
Bye.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago.